Much like the Persian Empire, the rise of the Roman Empire took shape on the margins of the civilized world, and was an unlikely rags-to-riches story. Rome began as a small and impoverished city-state on the western side of central Italy in the 8th century before the Common Era. So weak, according to legend, that Romans were reduced to kidnapping neighboring women to maintain their city's population. In a transformation of epic proportions, Rome subsequently became the center of an enormous imperial state that encompassed the Mediterranean basin and included parts of continental Europe, Britain, North Africa, and the Middle East. Originally ruled by a king, around 509 B.C.E., Roman aristocrats threw off the monarchy and established a republic in which the men of a wealthy class, known as patricians, dominated. Executive authority was exercised by two consuls, who were advised by a patrician assembly, the Senate. Deepening conflict with the poorer classes, called plebeians, led to important changes in Roman political life. A written code of law offered plebeians some protections from abuse. A system of public assemblies provided an opportunity for lower classes to shape public policy. And a new office of tribune, who represented plebeians, allowed them to block unfavorable legislation. Romans took great pride in this political system, believing that they enjoyed greater freedom than did many of their more autocratic neighbors. The values of the republic, rule of law, the rights of citizens, the absence of pretension, upright moral behavior, keeping one's word, were later idealized as the way of the ancestors. Unlike in Greece, where men directly voted on legal affairs, the new government of the Roman Empire was a representative democracy in which men elected the officials who ultimately made the decisions on legal affairs. If this sounds familiar, it's because the United States is at heart a representative democracy as well. With this political system and these values, the Romans launched their empire-building enterprise, a prolonged process that took more than 500 years. It began in the 490s before the Common Era, when Roman control over its Latin neighbors in central Italy, and over the next several hundred years encompassed most of the Italian peninsula. Between 264 and 146 BCE, victory in the Punic Wars with Carthage, a powerful empire with its capital in northern Africa, extended Roman control over the western Mediterranean, including Spain, and made Rome a naval power. Subsequent expansion in the eastern Mediterranean brought the ancient civilizations of Greece, Egypt, and Mesopotamia under Roman domination. Rome also expanded into territories in southern and western Europe, including present-day France and Britain. By early in the 2nd century, the Roman Empire had reached its maximum extent. Like classical Greece, that empire has been associated with Europe. But in its own time, elites in North Africa and Southwest Asia likewise claimed Roman identity, and the empire's richest provinces were in the east. No overall design or blueprint drove the building of empire, nor were there any precedents to guide the Romans. What they created was something wholly new, an empire that encompassed the entire Mediterranean basin and beyond. It was a piecemeal process, which the Romans invariably saw as defensive. Each addition of territory created new vulnerabilities, which could be assuaged only by more conquests. For some, the growth of empire represented opportunity. Poor soldiers hoped for land, loot, or salaries that might lift their families out of poverty. The well-to-do or well-connected gained great estates, earned promotions, and sometimes achieved public acclaim and high political office. The wealth of long-established societies in the eastern Mediterranean, like Greece and Egypt, beckoned, as did the resources and food supplies of the less developed regions, such as Western Europe. There was no shortage of motivation for the creation of the Roman Empire. Although Rome's central location in the Mediterranean basin provided a convenient launching pad for empire, it was the army, well-trained, well-fed, and well-rewarded, that built this empire. Drawing on the growing population of Italy, that army was often brutal in war. Carthage, for example, was utterly destroyed. The city was razed to the ground, and its inhabitants either killed or sold into slavery. Nonetheless, Roman authorities could be generous to former enemies. Some were granted Roman citizenship. Others were treated as allies and allowed to maintain their local government. As the empire grew, so too did political forces in Rome that favored its continued expansion and were willing to commit the necessary manpower and resources. The relentless expansion of empire raised yet another profound question for Rome. Could republican government and values survive the acquisition of a huge empire? The wealth of empire enriched a few, enabling them to acquire large estates and many slaves, while pushing growing numbers of free farmers into the cities and into poverty. Imperial riches also empowered a small group of military leaders, Marius, Sulla, Pompey, Julius Caesar, who recruited their troops directly from the ranks of the poor, and whose fierce rivalries brought about a civil war in Rome during the first century before the Common Era. Traditionalists lamented the apparent decline of republican values: simplicity, service, free farmers as the backbone of the army, the authority of the Senate, amid the self-seeking ambition of the newly rich and powerful. When the dust settled from the Civil War, Rome was clearly changing, for authority was now vested primarily in an emperor, the first of whom was Octavian, later granted the title of Augustus, which implied a divine status for the ruler. The Republic was history, and Rome had become an empire and its ruler an emperor. But it was an empire with an uneasy conscience, for many felt that in acquiring empire, Rome had betrayed and abandoned its republican origins. Augustus was careful to maintain the forms of the Republic, the Senate, consuls, public assemblies, and referred to himself as first man rather than king or emperor, even as he accumulated enormous personal power. And in a bow to republican values, he spoke of the empire's conquest as reflecting the power of the Roman people rather than that of the Roman state. Despite this rhetoric, he was emperor in practice, if not in name, for he was able to exercise sole authority backed up by his command of a professional army. Later emperors were less reluctant to flaunt their imperial prerogatives. During the first 2 centuries of the Common Era, this empire, in disguise, provided security, grandeur, and relative prosperity for the Mediterranean world. This was the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, the era of imperial Rome's greatest extent and greatest authority. As with many other parts of Eurasia following the conquest of Alexander the Great, ancient Roman architecture adopted many aspects of Greek architectural style. However, the Romans were also great innovators, and they quickly adopted new construction techniques, used new materials, and uniquely combined existing techniques with creative designs to produce a whole range of new architectural structures, such as the basilica, triumphal arcs, monumental aqueducts, amphitheaters, and residential housing. Many of these innovations were a response to the changing practical needs of Roman society, and these projects were all backed by a state apparatus which funded, organized, and spread them around the Roman world, guaranteeing their permanence so that many of these great edifices survive to the present day. The Roman Forum is a rectangular forum surrounded by the ruins of several important ancient government buildings at the center of the city of Rome. Citizens of the ancient city referred to this space, originally a marketplace, as the Forum Magnum, or simply the Forum. It was for centuries the center of Roman public life, the site of triumphal processions and elections, the venue for public speeches, criminal trials, and gladiatorial matches, and the nucleus of commercial affairs. Here statues and monuments commemorated the city's great men, the teeming heart of ancient Rome. It has been called the most celebrated meeting place in the world and in all history. The Romans constructed numerous aqueducts to bring water from distant sources into their cities and towns, supplying public baths, latrines, fountains, and private households. Wastewater was removed by complex sewage systems and released into nearby bodies of water, keeping the towns clean and free from effluent. Aqueducts also provided water for mining operations, milling, farms, and gardens. Aqueducts moved water through gravity alone, being constructed along a slight downward gradient within conduits of stone, brick, or concrete. The Colosseum, also known as the Flavian Amphitheater, is an elliptical amphitheater in the center of the city of Rome, Italy. Built of concrete and stone, it was the largest amphitheater of the Roman Empire and is considered one of the greatest works of Roman architecture and engineering. The Colosseum could hold, it is estimated, between 50,000 and 80,000 spectators, and was used for gladiatorial contests and public spectacles such as mock sea battles, animal hunts, executions, reenactments of famous battles, and dramas based on classical mythology. The building ceased to be used for entertainment in the early medieval era. It was later reused for such purposes as housing, workshops, quarters for a religious order, a fortress, a quarry, and a Christian shrine. Although in the 21st century it stays partially ruined because of the damage caused by devastating earthquakes and stone robbers, the Colosseum is still an iconic symbol of imperial Rome. It is one of Rome's most popular tourist attractions and has close connections with the Roman Catholic Church, as each Good Friday the Pope leads a torchlit Way of the Cross procession that starts in the area around the Colosseum. Another iconic piece of Roman architecture is the Triumphal Arch, which is a monumental structure in the shape of an archway with one or more arched passageways, often designed to span a road. The Triumphal Arch was used to commemorate victorious generals or significant public events, such as the founding of new colonies, the construction of a road or bridge, the death of a member of the imperial family, or the accession of a new emperor. The survival of great Roman triumphal arches such as the Arch of Titus inspired many post-Roman states and rulers up to the present day to erect their own arches in emulation of the Romans. Arches in the Roman style have been built in many cities around the world, most notably the Arch de Triomphe in Paris, the Narva Triumphal Arch in St. Petersburg, and the Wellington Arch in London. Roman theaters derived their basic design from the Theatre of Pompey, the first permanent Roman theater. The Roman theater was shaped with a half-circle or orchestra space in the front of the stage. Most often the audience sat here in comfortable chairs. Occasionally, however, the actors would perform in this space. To solve the problem of lighting and sound, the theaters were outdoors. The Romans built theaters everywhere, even on flat plains, by raising the whole structure off the ground. As a result, the whole structure was more integrated, and the entrances and exits could be built into the cave, as is done in large theaters and sports arenas today. The arena was as high as the rest of the structure, so the audience could not look out beyond the stage. It also created more of an enclosed atmosphere, and may have helped to keep out the noises of the city. A tarp could be rigged and moved over the top of the theater to create shade. Most theaters still standing date back to the Hellenistic period. The Pantheon is a building in Rome, Italy, originally commissioned by Marcus Agrippa during the reign of Augustus as a temple to all the gods of ancient Rome, and rebuilt by Emperor Hadrian in 126 CE. The building is circular with a portico of large granite Corinthian columns, 8 in the first rank and 2 groups of 4 behind, under a pediment. A rectangular vestibule links the porch to the rotunda, which is under a coffered concrete dome with a central opening known as an oculus to the sky. Almost 2,000 years after it was built, the Pantheon's dome is still the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome. The height of the oculus and the diameter of the interior circle are the same, 43.3 meters or 142 feet. It is one of the best preserved of all ancient Roman buildings. It has been in continuous use throughout its history, and since the 7th century, the Pantheon has been used as a Roman Catholic church, dedicated to St. Mary and the Martyrs, and informally known as St. Maria's Rotunda. The Circus Maximus is an ancient Roman chariot racing stadium and mass entertainment venue located in Rome, Italy. It was the first and largest stadium in ancient Rome and could accommodate nearly 150,000 spectators. The circus was Rome's largest venue for ludi, or public games connected to Roman religious festivals. These games were sponsored by leading Romans or the Roman state for the benefit of the Roman people and gods. Baths for bathing and relaxing were a common feature of Roman cities throughout the empire. The often huge bath complexes included a wide diversity of rooms offering different temperatures and facilities such as swimming pools and places to read, relax, and socialize. Roman baths, with their need for large open spaces, were also important drivers in the evolution of architecture, offering the first dome structures in classical architecture. Baths were built using millions of fireproof terracotta bricks, and the finished buildings were usually sumptuous affairs with fine mosaic floors, marble-covered walls, and decorative statues. Generally opening around lunchtime and open until dusk, baths were accessible to all, both rich and poor. In the reign of Diocletian, for example, the entrance fee was a mere 2 denarii, the smallest denomination of bronze coinage. Sometimes, on occasions such as public holidays, the baths were even free to enter.